So, as we dive in, I want to ask you guys something today. Let me ask, has anyone here ever worked retail before? Retail, working at Walmart or I don't know, any other store that buys something and then sells it to the general public. Does anyone here work retail now? That's a good question. Yeah? Okay, I'll pray for you after service. Man, I'll tell you, out of all the jobs that I've had in my life, which is a lot, out of all the jobs that I've had, there's actually exactly two jobs that I've sworn that I will never work again. One was selling vacuums door to door. That was pretty awful. Um, Real talk, if anyone tries to like rope you in with that whole like spiel, like you'll be your own boss, and if you sell at least one a month, we'll guarantee. No, they're lying to you. It's a lie from the pits of hell. Don't do it. Sorry. Selling vacuums door to door. Number two was retail. It's not to talk down to anyone that works retail, because I highly doubt most people go into retail thinking, this is my dream job, this is what I want to do with my life. Usually, I mean, there could be rare cases, but usually that's not how that ends up working out. Because the job's a job. But there's just something about retail that's just so soul-crushing, at least to me, right? I don't know, maybe I'm just a weirdo and I just don't enjoy it. Maybe you enjoy it, but to me, man, there's something about retail that's just so soul-crushing. Like, even just going to Walmart just to shop these days. Man, it can be an awful experience, right? Like, with the awful, like, fluorescent lights in the carts that always have one wheel that like to try to do their own thing, right? Like, they're just like, get me out of here. Or the fact that everything's locked these days, right? Like, getting toothpaste off the shelf requires waiting 5 minutes for an employee to show up to unlock the dang thing. Like, I don't know. I can't do it. And if you've never worked retail before, let me ask you this. Can you imagine, with Walmart being like not everyone's first choice to go to hang out anyway, can you imagine having to spend 8 hours a day at Walmart, right? Can you imagine being the guy that has to be the one to go around opening shelves and stuff for every person that asks every 30 seconds, right? Man, I've lived that life, and I'll be real, I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all. Like, in the slightest. Some people, they get these like nostalgia blinders, right? Like, where they don't remember exactly how bad the job was. Like, almost like the endorphins that the ladies get after they have a baby to make them forget how bad having a baby was, right? Some people get that for their jobs, but me, I don't. Whenever I think about my time in retail, I don't get feelings of joy. I don't get feelings of satisfaction of like a job well done. I don't get feelings of super like proudness of contributing to society. But when I think about my time in retail, I get mostly like existential dread, right? And I don't want to diminish someone that suffers from things like PTSD or anything like that. But real talk, I think that might be the closest word to what I feel when I think about my time in retail. Straight up, I don't think I could do the job again today. I don't think I could. Like, honestly, I think I'd get fired the first day because I just ain't got no chill no more, right? I don't got the patience to deal with customers anymore. Just all the dumb questions and comments from people, man. They can be so mean to, like this is cheaper at other stores. Why are you here, right? Go shop there. What, you need directions? I can print out a MapQuest for you, right? Who remembers MapQuest? Those things were rad. I can call an Uber. Will that work? Cheaper at other stores. You think I set the prices? I'm a seasonal employee, man. I'm a slave here. Or how about this? Do you work here? Obviously, yes. Well, you think I'm behind the counter because I got lost? How many of you guys wear the Walmart polos for the drip? Like, I don't wear a name tag recreationally, right? I'm just kidding. I'm actually going to go see the midnight premiere of Walmart the movie later. So, or how about this one? Can you just check in the back? Can you just accept we don't have it? The back ain't some magical place, man. What do you think is back there? Santa's workshop? Man, the only thing back there is a clipboard with our schedules and some brownies that Darcy brought in. And you don't want to eat them, I promise you. Or some of my favorite, like this one's one of my favorites. I can't believe they have you working Thanksgiving. I can't believe you're shopping on Thanksgiving. Well, why do you think I'm here? It's because of you, bro. Why do you think I'm here? I have to stand here 15 hours today so you can yell at me instead of your family. I work retail. I don't even remember what Thanksgiving is, right? Or all the cliches, the ones that everyone says that makes them think they're so hilarious, right? Like, are you working hard or hardly working? I'm hardly laughing. I'm already at work. I don't have a time for a second job pretending you're funny, Jim. Why don't you tell me something I don't hear every day, like thank you, right? Or the famous, didn't scan, must mean it's free. You must be out of your mind to think that that's the first person to say that to me today. Not even the first person to say it in the last hour. Don't worry about the scan. I'll type in the code and charge you double for your trouble there. The worst one, though, the worst cliche is one that no matter what, like most of the time, like, you know, because I work front office of a medical practice, I get a lot of these a lot of the time. And I do the laugh and I do the smile, but there's times that, this one in particular, I never smile, I never laugh. And that's the one that's like, you know, you should smile more. I don't know who needs to hear this today, but I can't think of a single reason where it would be appropriate to tell someone to smile more, unless that someone is a literal clown, right? Like, come on, don't do that. And just for instance, one time I was working the till. I was at Walmart. They had called me up from the tire and lube section that I got fired from a few weeks later. Another story for another time. I'm working the till, and my till neighbor, this young girl, who's been having a rough day. Like her mascara's all smeared. You can tell she's been crying, and she still even has that super upset cry, like leftover thing, like the right, like the that you get between cries. She's still doing that while she's checking this guy out, and this guy, I don't know if he's being oblivious or what, but he tells her, looks her straight in the eyes, like, you know, you should smile more. Life's not that hard. And she loses it. Just like straight up, like runs off, sobbing. And the guy looks at me, he's like, what's her problem? It's like, her brother died yesterday, genius. I like to think that he wouldn't make that mistake again, but let me ask, have any of you guys dealt with that before? Maybe not, you know, your brother dying, that'd be terrible, but I don't know, maybe you're battling like a bout of depression, or maybe you're just having a really crappy day, like, I don't know, maybe some do-gooder, they hit you with the phrase like that, like, turn that frown upside down, right, like, or depressed, why? Your life is so good. What do you have to be depressed about? Like, right, like someone hit you with that, and then, you know that they're trying to be nice, but there's still that, like, sarcastic thought, like, in the back of your mind that says, wow, thanks. I never knew that I could just thought about it like that. Instead of being sad, I could just be happy. Thanks, I'm cured, right? If only it worked that way, right? If only our emotions and feelings were that simple. I don't know about you, but if I was able to control my emotions like a light switch, how awesome would that be, right? Like, how awesome would it be just to keep that switch like duct taped to happy, right? Like, just, no one touch that switch. Everyone has one of those switches. If only it would work like that. Emotions are weird, aren't they? They're just like those things that, like, they drive 95% of our actions here on this earth, but there's something that we can't just control with our thoughts. We can't just power through our emotions like it's something that just takes time to change, stuff like that. It's not that easy. But what if I told you? What if I told you, well, maybe not like duct taping a light switch, but what if I told you could choose happiness? What if I told you could choose things like joy for your life? This morning, we are in our third and our final week of our series, Soundtrack. Everyone say that with me today. Soundtrack. There, you're awake, you're awake, you're awake. And as we close out this conversation that we started a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, our goal is to begin to ask the question, what does your life sound like? What noise is your life making? Because when we get down to it, I believe our lives, I believe they have a soundtrack, right? I believe that it's making a noise, a melody, this distinct overall presentation that creates an atmosphere, if you will, as we pioneer through this thing we call life, just like in a movie or in a TV show. I believe we all have this score, this soundtrack playing behind us that sets the tone for every single thing that we do. And when it comes to us as Jesus followers, as we ask that question, right, what does your life sound like? What noise does your life make? As we ask this question, I think we need to tack on another one to that and continually ask ourselves, does the sound of my life, does it point people to God, or does it point somewhere else? Does the soundtrack of my life display the truth and the characteristics of our God, or does it paint a different picture? In the first week one, as we kicked off this series, we dove into the Word. We saw how Jesus, how He perfectly laid out what our soundtracks are supposed to sound like, right? We saw how according to Jesus, the sounds our lives make should point people to Him. How? By loving one another, just like He first loved us. Amen? That through things like charity and unity and loyalty, the world would begin to take notice of our relationships here in the church. That no, we won't be perfect, but there'll be something about us that causes the world to say, hey, there's something different. Last week, as we dove in for week 2, we looked at how as Jesus followers, when it comes to our relationships with both those in and outside the church, we need to pursue unity. Unity, that as Jesus followers, we shouldn't be prone to argumentativeness for its own sake, but we should show love even if they disagree with us. Amen? How as Christians we should show maturity, but not getting caught up in dumb, stupid, frivolous arguments. Instead, we can maintain a strong soundtrack by showing grace, speaking truth, engaging with discernment, and again, at the root of it all, love. And this week as we close this awesome series, I want to take a look at something I feel a lot of us are lacking today. Something I feel not even just in our church, not even just in our town or city or state or nation, but just in our world today that so many people have been lacking. And that thing is joy. Joy. Before we dive in, though, as always, let's start first by opening up to our God in prayer today. Join me, church. God, we thank you today. We're so excited to be in your presence. We're so excited to be in your word. We thank you for these minutes and these moments that we get to share together. And God, we just want more of you today. God, we want more of your peace. We want more of your calm. We want more of your joy today. We want more of your joy. So as we talk about this, as we close out this series, God, I pray that you would continue to speak to us, that you would continue to reveal yourself to us, God. And I pray that you would bless us with your joy, with the joy of the Lord. And that it would be our strength today. That it would be that thing that we can fall back on no matter what is going on in our lives, that we can continually have the joy of the Lord. So bless our time together, God. Be the root of this conversation, the center, the cornerstone of it, and speak to us in a brand new way today. And all God's people said, amen. Amen. So, if you're following along with us, taking notes, whatever it is, we're going to be hanging out today in the book of James. The book of James. And before we read, I want to say that recently, I've been thinking about joy a lot. Joy. And I believe that today, God's going to use me to, I don't know, maybe help you develop some joy in your life. I feel like God's going to call us to develop some joy in my life. And trust me, I've studied. Joy has been more important to me, it seems, every year since I've been alive, right? I feel like in my 20s, I cared about more like accomplishments. I cared more about, if I'm being real with you, simply surviving sometimes, but mostly accomplishments. And as I'm in my 30s now, something I'm figuring out is this, is what's the point if you don't enjoy it, right? What's the point in doing something awesome, doing something amazing, if you're not in a position to appreciate the accomplishment because you constantly need more, right? I feel like as a society, we've kind of graduated to a society that feels like it constantly needs more of this, that, and the other. So lately, I've been feeling like I've been on this scriptural trajectory, right? And I kind of want to bring you in with it today. So let me ask, would it be all right if we talked a little bit about joy today? Yeah? Okay. I'm excited. Do you feel my enthusiasm this morning, church? There we go. So today, like I said, we're going to be in James chapter 1. We're going to read verses 2 through 4. We'll start here because I believe that there are some things that are destroying your joy today, church. Now, maybe you're unaware of. Maybe you're unaware of, and I think James is going to teach us how we can begin to develop joy. And I got to say that's a very different thought, developing joy, than, say, the thought of discovering joy, right? Because discovering joy means that, like, maybe it's like waiting somewhere for you. Like maybe it's in the bush outside that you just got to go check underneath. Maybe it's waiting for you in your next career move. Maybe it's waiting for you in your next relationship. But discovering joy, it implies that it's waiting for you somewhere that you're not right now. That you have to leave where you're at to go find it. But James, I think, is going to show us something that maybe it might be familiar to a few of you, but it's very strange if you consider what he's actually saying. So let's start with the first 3 verses. He says this, James, this is 2 through 4. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kind." I gotta be real, that's not where I'm looking for joy, right? That's not what I was praying for. It's not what I was hoping for, asking for, believing for. Anyways, what the Bible says. "Consider pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Continues, "Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." So today, I want to kind of dive in. And I want to talk about these verses. And as we do, I want to talk about a couple of different things I think we need to know, a couple of different points, a couple of different mindsets when it comes to these verses and the joy inside our lives. Because I firmly believe that Jesus, as we talked about the last couple of weeks, he's got a score for your life, right? He's got a soundtrack for your life. And that soundtrack, it should sound like love, it should sound like unity, and I think that soundtrack needs to sound like joy, right? It needs to sound like joy. And the first idea I have when it comes to joy this morning is we need to make the distinction of joy. First one is the distinction of joy, knowing what joy really is, understanding the nature of this thing that we call joy. In James, he helps us to do that by first helping us to understand that there are trials of many kinds, right? That's what verse 2 said. In the old King James Version, it says diverse trials. Something I've learned over the last couple of years is that though we're not all going through the same thing, we're all going through something, right? And how many know that there are as many different kinds of trials as there are different kinds of drinks at Starbucks, right? There's as many different kinds of trials as there are colors of paint at Home Depot. And throughout my life, I've found that there are trials associated with everything under the sun. There's trials associated with plenty. There's trials associated with poverty, right? There's trials associated with single people trials. There's married people trials, right? There's trials associated with loneliness, trials associated with companionship. There's so many different types of trials that we can find ourselves in today. And that's what James is saying here. He's making distinction that there are different kinds of trials. You know, there's some of us, you know, we're here thinking, we're talking, we're saying, hey, can I try a different kind of trial, right? Right, like, can I trade trials? You're talking about rich people trials. Can I try some of those ones, right? Can I make a trade? I'll trade my poor people problems for the rich people problems. The married problems, I think I'd be a little bit better at those kind of problems instead of the single people problems. Can we try those ones? I think I'm more prepared for those kinds of trials. But over the last few years, I think something we can see is that really our trials, they can shift in an instant, can't they? In an instant. You know, maybe right now you're walking through some rich people trials, right? And as you look at your life, you know, there's things that you're worried about, like your mortgage, your car payment. You just bought that fancy fifth wheel. You got that side-by-side. And you're figuring out, all right, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to do that? But, you know, general things are good. But then all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe the price of copper tanks again, right? And all of a sudden, you know, downsizing and layoffs happen. And now, instead of rich people problems, what do you got? You got poor people problems now, right? Now you know where I live half the time. Or I don't know, maybe your marriage is going great. Maybe you got a few married people problems. Things are going good, but maybe Maybe your married people problems aren't the same as your spouse's married people problems. You're not on the same page, and before you know it, you don't got married people problems anymore. Maybe you got some single people problems now. Things can change in this, and as a result, we can see that when it comes to things like happiness and joy, and no matter how great your name is, no matter how much cool stuff you got, no matter how solid you are financially, no matter how rock solid your marriage is, things can still turn. You can still want to even get to the point where you want to take your own life, because joy, I got to say this, joy is not a byproduct of what people say about you. Joy is not a byproduct about how much money is in your bank account. Joy is not a byproduct on how great your marriage is. So there's different kinds of trials. And added to that, most of us, we don't understand the distinction between a temptation and a trial, right? In the language James uses in the biblical writing, that the common Greek of his day, it actually allows for both. When he says trials of many kinds, he could have just as easily been referring to things like economic hardship, right, or the persecution that the Jesus followers were facing back then, or he could have been talking about temptation. And it's important to know the distinction between the types of trials or temptations you're experiencing in this life. Otherwise, you might spend years blaming the devil for your bad decision, right? Different kinds of trials. Some of our trials are the result of evil in the world, don't get me wrong. And these result in all sorts of spiritual warfares, right? Some of your trials are the results of things we did contrary to our inner wisdom. There's different kinds of trials. There's a distinction in the trials. And if you don't know the difference between a temptation and a trial, oftentimes maybe you'll try to use the wrong tool on the trial, right? Because when tempted, the Bible teaches us what? It teaches us to resist. When you face a trial, though, a lot of the times the key, it's not resistance, but it's acceptance, right? And this is important for us to see a distinction, because a lot of times we're accepting things that we should be resisting, and we're resisting things that we should be accepting. And maybe that's why your life feels like it's in chaos right now, and you don't have joy. We need wisdom to make this distinction, to know the trial we're in. God, is this one that you want me to fight? Or do you want me to do what that parable says that one time with the weeds that were growing alongside the tares and leave it alone and let you deal with it? What do you want me to do, God? There's a distinction. There are different kinds of trials. And some of the stuff I'm dealing with right now as a parent is just a trial called parenthood, right? Like you can't cast it out. You can't anoint it. You can't instruct it. It's a different kind of trial. It's just life. Some of the stuff I'm dealing with now is a temptation, and not a trial, a temptation. Some of it's actually what I believe is from the pit of hell, right? Not that the devil is personally assigned to me, but just some stuff is evil, right? Some stuff is against my purpose. And I got to say, side note here, I think a lot of times we give ourselves a little bit too much credit. Just want to tell you, don't give yourself too much credit. A lot of us like to think that the devil, he's got nothing better to do than give us a flat tire first thing Monday morning so we don't get to work. Personally, I think the devil's a little busier than that, right? The devil's not like God. He's not omnipresent. He's not omnipotent. He doesn't know it all. So I don't think that there's a devil under the pew tying your shoes together right now to make you fall. I don't think that's happening. I think it could happen, but I think a lot of times we give ourselves too much credit. I think when it comes down to distinguishing the trials that I'm in, it helps. It helps. It helps understand the distinction. And this is where we're diving in, the distinction between joy and pleasure. Because those aren't the same thing. I mean, have you ever seen those cliche signs, right? You know what I'm talking about, like the church, how some churches put like the snarky, funny sayings on their marquee that's out by the side of the road, right? Like, they got these funny little quotes. I saw one the other day, and I don't personally like putting the funny, snarky things on our sign. I like, a little bit different, but that's not to say it's bad. But the other day I saw one that was interesting to me, and it said, no Jesus, no joy. No Jesus, no joy, and it was spelled N-O, right? N-O, Jesus, N-O, joy. If you don't got Jesus, well, then I guess you don't have joy, right? And then underneath it said it again, no Jesus, no joy, except this time it was spelled K-N-O-W. So if you do know Jesus, then you can know joy, right? When I saw it, I thought, that's cute, but I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true. No Jesus, no joy. There's a lot of things you can do that'll bring you joy if you don't know Jesus, right? How many of you guys know that one's true? Like Krispy Kremes taste good whether you know Jesus or not, right? My taste buds didn't get saved, but Krispy Kreme's good. It's fun to talk bad about people, no matter if you're saved or not. The only difference is the quantity versus the quality, right? We can do things that bring us great joy. I don't know. I think surfing in Hawaii would be really fun right now, whether you're a Jesus follower or not, right? But it's quantity versus quality. You also hear preachers say stuff like God doesn't care if you're happy. He just wants to make you holy. And I can't believe how many people say amen to some business like that, right? That you would never feel about your own kid. Let me ask, do we have any parents in the house? Parents. How many of you parents don't care if your kid is ever happy at all in the slightest ever in this life, right? If you raise your hand, I think I'm going to call CPS. Real talk. Real talk. Ain't no good father there. But no, he's a good father. That's the way the Bible describes him. He's a good father who gives good gifts. And I never understood the distinction sometimes. The distinction between joy and pleasure. The distinction between joy and happiness. Why? Because honestly, there's not really a big difference in the biblical language. It's not different like in English. Like we've got like Pharrell happy, which is like that dancing happy, right? Like, woo! And then we got like the Hebrew. They had happy, which is the same word for blessed. They had happy, which is the same word for joy. And when he says count it joy, what he's saying is consider yourself supremely happy. That's the literal translation. Supremely happy. So we need to make this distinction, I guess, between generic joy and Jesus joy. Generic joy and Jesus joy. Because it said in verse 2, consider it pure joy. And the way my mind works, if there's such a thing as pure joy, there might be another kind of joy, right? Actually, I feel a little bit bad about that. I cheated a little bit because that's more of a grammar issue. If I'm being honest with you guys, the literal translation of these words, count it all joy. He doesn't say pure joy, but I do have another verse for you to make it up to you guys. Let me do Hebrews chapter 12. I've always loved this picture of joy because it helps me to make that distinction between joy and pleasure. Pleasure, it can be associated with joy, but joy is not dependent on pleasure in our lives. This is the second thing I want to talk about today. First was distinction of joy. Second is the direction of joy. The direction of joy. We're talking about how sometimes we find our joy controlled by circumstances and situations. But Jesus, he gives us a picture that stands contrary to that cultural expectation of joy. And I promise I'm going to read the scripture in just a second, but there seems to be right now more than there was than, say, when my grandparents were in their 30s and 40s. This pressure to always feel pleasure, right? It's like it's weighing down on us. It's no longer just a desire we have that we want to feel good, but it's almost like the way our social media has constructed our viewing experiences of other people's lives through these filters, right, of their most desirable moments. There's as if there's something wrong with me if I'm not always constantly happy, right? I'll tell you, this is a problem with me. It's a problem with me because I'm not genetically predisposed to be happy. I'm just not. I found that out about myself pretty early in life. I'm not like one of you guys who find reasons to smell the roses, right? Who just find these reasons to be happy. Some of you can appreciate the rain and appreciate the sunshine. The rain, it makes you feel like super relaxed. The sunshine makes you feel active. You can find joy in everything that you do. I'm not of your species, and frankly, you make me a little bit sick. But when it comes to joy, it's something different. It's something different. I believe the pressure to feel pleasure, and I'll be honest, I feel the pressure to feel pleasure is why so many of us today feel so miserable. Because we have this pressure on us that says, be happy or else, right? And don't get me wrong. We're living in the midst of a generation that thinks joy is associated with a feeling in your flesh. And don't get me wrong, I think it can be. I think joy can be a feeling, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It's important that I say it can be a feeling, but it doesn't have to start with a feeling. And this is where we flip the flow. Can we flip the flow real quick? If anybody flipped the flow, it was Jesus. Because here he is, think about it for a second. Here he is, he's up on a cross. He's being mocked. His reputation is beyond repair. Here he is being spat on and condescended to by the ones he created. And the writer of Hebrews says this in Hebrews 12:2. We need to fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured on the cross. For the joy set before him, he endured on the cross. And this is where my message really happens, church. Let me ask, what have you set before you? What have you set before you? Because that is what your joy is connected to. What have you set before you? And I'll break that down the best I can. I believe that joy is a point of view. I do. I believe joy is a way of looking at things. Joy is a way of looking at life. When I start to think about joy like that, I don't know about you, but it helps me. I don't know about you, but when I start to think about joy as a viewpoint, it begins to set me free from feeling this need of needing to feel a certain way, right? I'm feeling this need of like, man, I have everything going for me. Why am I sad? I'm feeling this need of like, you know, I can't imagine, but the world is for me. I've got so much stuff. I got an amazing family, yet I still feel this way. What is wrong with me? Anyone felt that one before? If so many people quitting their jobs because they're unhappy, not really understanding that sometimes joy, it's not the absence of sadness or the presence of the spectacular, but joy is something else. And all we need to do is look at that one verse where it says, for Jesus, the joy was set before him. I want to use that as a picture for a second. He set joy before him. In order to endure the cross, that's the next part, endured the cross, scorning its shame. Let me say it like this. He didn't find joy in the event. He wasn't some like sadist that got joy out of being hurt. He didn't find joy in the feeling of hanging on the cross. It wasn't like since he was the Son of God, the nails transcended the laws of pain, the material laws of the universe. It was painful. It was agonizing. It was torture, but because of purpose. Did you know that it's very different to go through pain with purpose than pain without purpose? It's the difference between Maverick, my boy, jumping on my back, right? He's only 60 pounds. Jumping on my back and me not knowing he's about to jump on my back. And when he does, I can feel every disc slip in my lower back and it brings me down on the ground like I'm 73 years old, right? Difference between that and me putting 60 pounds on a bar to squat it, right? When I'm expecting it, if I do it on purpose, that's a warm-up weight. But if I don't expect it, it might take me down. It might take me to the ground. Same weight, but one I was ready for, right? And just like that, when Jesus, when he hung on the cross, he wasn't surprised by the shame. He wasn't surprised by the suffering. He wasn't surprised by the pain or the jeering. He wasn't surprised by the spit. He wasn't surprised by the blood. Why? Because joy is a focus before it's a feeling. Are you tracking with me, church, today? Joy is a focus before it's a feeling. And while we're chasing a feeling called joy, I believe God has given us the ability not to choose our feelings, but he enables us to choose joy. Why? Because joy is a point of view. Church, I believe too many of us are chasing joy the feeling instead of joy the mindset. It's like we're trying to force joy down our throats, right? Like if I could just make my soundtrack be Happy by Pharrell, right? And just force myself to constantly listen to that. Maybe it'll sink in or something just over and over. Because I am happy alone if you feel. Just over and over and over that maybe it'll work. That don't work, trust me. It don't work. I saw it on Pinterest once and I tried it and it sucked. It didn't work. And then I felt guilty because I couldn't find joy and it made me feel less joy. And now I'm in this weird joyless pit of joylessness and it's all cyclical. And it's the difference between choice and consequence, right? And now we're wrapping it back up to where we were at the beginning. Joy is a choice. Really? I know some people, some of the trials that some people are going through, they're not. Choice is more like mental illness sometimes, right? it's kind of hard for them to feel happy just because they got a good parking spot. No matter how much you tell them just be happy or to count their blessings, it won't always work. James, he didn't tell us to count our blessings, did he? This isn't a nursery rhyme, this is scripture. But he said to count it all as joy. All of it as joy. You might not know this, but there's a statement in the financial world, right? When we're talking about things like income and expenses, right? Where you got your income on one side, your expenses on the other. And James, he's telling us that if you can learn to put some of that stuff in the income column that you thought was an expense, right? That maybe if we can start to put some stuff in that blessing column that maybe we thought was a burden. If you can flip the flow, you might actually have more joy in your life than maybe you know right now. You're not going to get it by praying for a feeling. I got to tell you that much. At least in my experience. I've never said the prayer, God, make me happy, and then just suddenly I'm happy, right? I wish that you're not going to get it by praying for a feeling, but you're going to get it by making choices. And again, don't get me wrong. Joy, it's not a choice. In fact, the worst way that I think you can get more joy is to focus on getting more joy, right? The best way to stop being happy is to ask yourself the question, am I happy? See, I don't remember my grandparents talking like this when I was a kid, right? I don't remember them asking questions like, am I really happy? And I might be wrong, and I can ask Grandma Judy later, but I don't think they really thought like that most of the time, right? There wasn't feeds and scrolling. There wasn't all this other stuff to make them feel unhappy at a moment's notice. There wasn't an infinite supply of unhappiness in their pocket in the form of social media, right? They didn't have that, so they focused on something else. What was it? What brings you joy if you focus on it? I know what it's not, right? It's not looking around. It's not doing this. It's not saying, oh, what are they doing over there? What's she wearing? What's he got on his wrist? What kind of shoes he got? Where did he go on vacation? What job is he in now? What's he doing? What's she doing? It's not going to bring you joy. It's not going to bring you joy. It's not going to do it. He said the joy is set before him. What's that mean? What's that mean? It means we can't be looking around and expect to have joy. We can't be judging my situations and circumstances based on other people's calling and expect to have joy. And I know it sounds so cliche, but I think it's so true, and I want to say it. Nothing destroys joy like comparison. Nothing destroys joy like comparison. The life you've got, let me say it like this. The life you've got, some of you would find so much enjoyment from. If only you'd stop doing this while you were living it, right? I mean, it hurts my neck demonstrating it, right? Can you imagine what it's doing to your soul? Having joy, man, I believe it's a decision. I do. Not to have more joy. That's the worst way to get it, but it's a decision on what are you going to focus on. That's the big thing of it. What are you going to focus on? And what can you focus on to get more joy? King David tells us in Psalm 16, verse 11, he says this, "You will make known to me the way of life. In your presence is fullness of joy." In your presence is fullness of joy. Say that with me. In your presence is fullness of joy. Presence, church. Presence. Presence. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go to a church to find joy, because I don't think God limits his presence to a building. It also doesn't mean that you'll only be happy when you're doing everything right, like God's rewarding you somehow for your behavior, because that's not the gospel. If we could behave right, then we wouldn't need Jesus in the first place, right? The good news of the gospel is for sinners and for the broken and for the lame and for the weak and for those that feel ashamed. But what it means is that joy can only truly come when you're focused on what God is doing in your life right now. You can't find joy by looking at what God's doing in someone else's life. You can't find joy by looking at what God did in your life 10 years ago, but it's what he's doing right now, in this moment, in this instant, in this place. What is God doing for you now? So if you're here, and I don't know, maybe joy isn't something that you define your life by today. Maybe that's not the best word choice you'd use, right? Joy and happiness is not the season that you're in. If that's you, I just want to encourage you. Maybe you need to stop looking around. Maybe you need to put Instagram away for a little bit. That's what I had to do. Here's a big one. Maybe you need to turn off the news. Maybe you need to turn off the news. That was a big one for me. You want to know how I got over a lot of my anxieties? I turned off the news. Because real talk, what are you going to do to fix it? What are you going to do? What are you going to do when they're rioting over in San Francisco? What are you going to do, if there's another bombing in the Middle East? What are you going to do about it? Probably nothing, right? I'm not saying don't be informed. I'm saying don't cave into the 24-hour news cycle. Why? Because it makes you depressed. It makes you anxious. It makes you think thoughts like the world's going to hell. But guess what? Our God isn't going to let that happen, is he? Why? Because he's got a new creation for us. We watch the news and we think there's no way God can fix this. We watch the news and it stifles our faith. Be informed, but don't make it your identity. Same with Instagram. You know, Instagram, I thought at first was really cool. Seeing all these pictures of all my friends doing cool stuff. But then you start to realize, that all the pictures that your friends are posting on Instagram, man, they're way cooler than yours, right? They're taking pictures of themselves like backpacking across Europe. They've always got a good cup of coffee. Maybe they're at an open mic night and they got some microbrewery or something. They're doing cool things. Pictures with them with their significant others. Pictures of them with their happy family and the happy kids. Pictures of them with their food. There's so many food pictures on Instagram, right? And all the while you're thinking, man, I wish I had a wife. Man, I wish I had a family. Man, I wish I had a job that let me go on vacation. Man, I wish I could go to Disneyland. Man, I wish I could go to a cool brewery and do an open mic night. I wish I could backpack across Europe. The next thing you know, you're depressed. And all that joy that maybe you had at one point has been sapped out of you. And I don't want to say either that these are the only reasons you can not have joy. There's very real issues, death, sickness, relational problems. Maybe you just got divorced. Maybe your relationship's not working out. Those are very real reasons. But you can still have joy in the midst of those storms. And that's an important distinction to make too. You don't need to be happy to have joy. I'll say that again. You don't need to be happy to have joy. How do I know? Because it said that he set his joy before him. You think Jesus was happy on the cross? You think Jesus was happy with a crown of thorns being shoved on his head? You think Jesus was happy with nails through his hands and his feet? It was like 6 hours he hung on the cross. You think he was happy to suffocate in his own blood? The thing to drink they would give him was vinegar. You think he's happy about that? No, he wasn't happy about that. But he still had joy. And the joy of the Lord was his strength to get through it. And that's another distinction. Joy will get you through. Joy is not a feeling. It's not an emotion. But joy is our strength. Joy is a viewpoint. And that viewpoint of joy will get us through anything that this world can throw at us. Why? Our joy doesn't come from us. It comes from God. And the joy of the Lord is our strength. What that means is we can hold on to it. That can be our anchor. That can be the thing that keeps us grounded in the midst of the worst storms we've ever gone through. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that having joy will keep you from sinking, but it will keep you. Joy won't keep you from getting wet. It'll keep you from getting sunk. So if that's you, maybe that's what you need. It's just that change in your viewpoint. that joy, it's not going to make everything better, but joy will make you better. Joy is not going to give you an easier time going through the valley, but joy will get you through the valley. So if you're here, with every head bowed, every eye closed, if maybe you need some more joy in your life. Maybe you need some more joy. Maybe you need some perspective changes. Maybe you need some joy. I would encourage you. We can give you some practical steps, like I said earlier. Turn off Instagram, turn off Facebook, turn off social media, turn off the news. Maybe as you turn those things off, as you make those changes, maybe you need to make another change. Maybe you need to start talking to God more. Maybe you start need to read in His word more. Maybe you need to start speaking His promises in your life more. Maybe you need to start surrounding yourself with people that'll speak life and life more abundantly instead of people that'll speak death and people that'll tear you down. Maybe you need that. Maybe you need to join us on our cornhole night this Thursday at 6 and enjoy some pizza and some good godly company as Grandma Judy wrecks us. Maybe that's what you need. Maybe you need a change of circumstances. Maybe you need a change of scenery. I don't know, but I think what we all need, we need a change of perspective. And maybe we need to start changing who we allow to speak into our life. I don't know. But if you're here, I think the first step is deciding, is making that choice of if I'm going to focus on what God is doing in my life, I'm going to stop focusing so much on everything else. That's what it comes down to, church. Focusing on what God is up to for you. I'm not saying you can't be happy for what God is doing in someone else's life. But stop making that your priority. Stop being envious of the blessings God's giving other people and start being thankful for the ones He's giving you right now. And it's easier said than done, but it starts with that little choice that says, I choose joy. And I choose to focus on what God is doing for me and in my life. And if you're here and I don't know, maybe you've never given this Jesus stuff a second thought. I don't know. Like I said earlier, I think you can enjoy things without knowing Jesus. People do it every day. I think you could probably live a decent life without Jesus as a part of it, but I do firmly believe you will never live your best life without Him as a part of it. Because Jesus, He changes everything. When Jesus came down, He did so to give us a new way to live, a new way to be human that wasn't based on what we can do. Wasn't based on how good we are and how we can say the right things and do the right things, being a part of the right group. But Jesus, He kicked down the doors and said, everyone's welcome. And all you have to do is believe in me. I'll clean you up. I'll pick you out of the mud and dust you off. You just gotta believe in me. So if that's you, maybe you never put your thought in that before, but I don't know, maybe something's tugging at you today. Maybe you're thinking, I don't have joy, but I want it. I want this joy that this weird bearded dude's talking about. That's it, is putting your trust in Jesus. It's saying, Jesus, I believe who you say you are. I believe what you've said you've done. I believe you died on the cross for me, that you paid the price for my sin, error, and wrong. And even though I'm still a messed up person, you make me right. And I'm choosing to trust in that, and I'm choosing to trust in you, and I'm choosing to believe in all of that. I'm going to follow you and let you change me. That's what it's all about. So if you're here and you want to put your trust in Jesus, whether it's for the first time or the millionth time, I always say it's a decision we need to make every single day. When our head rises from our pillow, all the way to when our head lays on our pillow, we need to make that decision every single day. So if that's you, if you want to make that decision today, the decision to trust Jesus with your life and to begin to follow Him, on the count of 3, every head bowed, every eye closed, I want you to raise your hand. And it might be a little weird. I'll be real. It might be a little weird. And it's not so we can count you. It's not so we can hunt you down after service or anything like that. But it's simply because I believe when we do a physical response to a decision made on the inside, it makes it more real to us. So on the count of 3, if you want to give your life to Jesus, if you want to put your trust in Him today, on the count of 3, just raise your hand. 1, Jesus, I'm choosing to trust you. 2, Jesus, fill me with your joy. 3, all across this place. If you want to give this Jesus thing a shot, all across this place. Amen. Amen. And would you pray with me today, church, as we close?